Victor spent his 20s telling everyone he was waiting for the right moment, but he already knew the truth. He was waiting for a moment that would never come. Every morning started the same way, his phone alarm buzzing, sunlight peeking weakly between the curtains, and the familiar pressure of regret pressing at his chest. Victor always set ambitious plans the night before: finish a chapter of his book, cook a new recipe, call his old friend, start jogging again. But by morning, the dreams had faded into background static, and the justified excuses exploded in his head. Maybe tomorrow, maybe after he checked the news, maybe after work. The maybe became routine, as if inertia was an invisible roommate dictating the rules of his apartment. His friends joked he was the king of someday, but Victor knew they were playing the same game. At work, his colleagues recycled the same lines: "We're all tired, it's just a phase." In the evenings, he scrolled through social media feeds full of people doing extraordinary things and felt a mixed rush of envy and disbelief. Did they know something he didn't? Or were they just better at acting before thinking? Nights grew heavier, half written emails, untouched sketchbooks, a guitar still missing its first song. The thought gnawed at him: why did action seem so impossible even as ideas burned in his head? Victor's apartment was a museum of unstarted projects. On his cluttered desk, notebooks waited for badges of inspiration, art supplies gathered dust, and piles of self help books sported cracked spines and pristine pages. Some spread open to chapters promising instant motivation. It felt like a cruel joke. The more advice he read, the less equipped he felt to begin. He recognized the pattern. The time spent preparing, researching, and perfecting imprisoned him more than any outside barrier ever could. This slow accumulation of paused intentions began years ago. In school, Victor was quick witted, curious, chasing ideas daily. But in his final year, a teacher's careless remark about wasting potential stuck to him like glue. Fear of disappointing others grew into a fear of trying at all. As the years tumbled on, Victor became cautious, trading risks for safety. The world rewarded careful plans. Friends and family echoed the gospel of patience. "There's no rush," they'd say. "Good things take time." But Victor noticed the calendar filling up with good intentions that went nowhere. Birthdays passed, seasons changed, and still his list of to do never transformed into done. One rainy Thursday, Victor found himself in a crowded cafe, surrounded by strangers lost in their own lives. He opened his laptop and faced the blank document. Around him, the room pulsed with energy, but inside, everything slowed. He overheard a couple next to him complaining about never having time. The conversation played in his mind like a soundtrack on loop. He wondered, was life really so busy, or was it simply easier to pretend it was? Victor realized he'd spent more hours making excuses than attempting anything difficult. It stung, but it also sparked an unfamiliar anger. As he walked home, Victor took stock of the hidden costs. The regret wasn't just about missed opportunities, it was about losing trust in himself. Each day spent waiting made his dreams feel less real and his confidence weaker. That night, he asked himself the hardest question yet: if I'm always waiting, how will I know when it's time to begin? The silence in his apartment answered for him. There would never be a perfect moment. All those years spent in preparation, Victor realized, were years he could have spent living. The decision, however small, was always his to make. Tomorrow would only change if he let it, and for the first time in a decade, Victor wondered what would happen if he did. Victor barely recognized his own apartment anymore. The museum of unstarted projects had begun to reflect not only his mind, but his actual mood: stale air, sticky notes on every surface, coffee cups with rings mapping out days spent thinking instead of doing, sunlight angled through blinds, spotlighting stacks of half-finished paintings, guitar tabs scrawled in pencil, self-help books leaning like exhausted marathoners. The mirror in the hallway seemed to shake its head at him in silent judgment every morning. He started hiding yesterday's to-do list under other papers, as if burying the evidence could make the guilt lighter. Sunday arrived, and with it the usual ache of inertia. Victor had slept poorly. He dreamt of a race where he waited politely for everyone else to finish, but somehow he never managed to start at all. He sat at the kitchen table with an untouched notebook and a knot in his stomach, remembering something his younger sister Mira had once said. Grinning as she packed for another reckless adventure, hesitating isn't safety, Vic. It's just pressing pause so long you start to forget what life sounds like in motion. Mira seemed fearless, powered by chaos and curiosity. She never made waiting look noble. Victor dialed her number this time, unable to shake the dream. Mira picked up on the third ring, so much noise in the background that he pictured her running through a crowded market in some place he'd never dare visit. He asked almost accusingly, "Don't you ever get stuck?" Mira laughed. "Duh, everyone gets stuck. You just move anyway. Movement is not the opposite of fear, it's what drags fear along until it gets tired." He half smiled, thinking about how she always sounded like she was quoting adventure movies. But Victor knew she lived her advice. Improv classes, cold job interviews, shaky new poems read aloud to strangers. She was flawed but busy. He was safe but stifled. This time, when Victor opened his computer, he decided no more master plans. He chose a single line from his draft and typed, eyes closed, to trick himself into boldness. The words were awkward, the line ugly, but it was alive. He forced himself to keep going. 10 lines, then a paragraph. He forced himself not to backspace, treating every sentence like a tossed stone breaking the stillness of a pond. Small action, ripple, progress. Later at the cafe, he ran into Ed, an old university friend who'd somehow made it and now worked in tech. Ed looked tired but happy. Victor blurted, "How do you get anything started?" Ed laughed, gestured at his ragged backpack. "I miss every deadline at least once, but I show up. That's the trick. Just show up, even with bad sketches or tired jokes or doubts. At some point, you start to care less about embarrassment and more about finishing a single thing." Ed's words stuck with Victor longer than he expected. Weekdays blurred as Victor launched a campaign against perfectionism. He set a timer and drew whatever came out. Most days he hated the results, but he shared one doodle online every evening, daring his friends to laugh. Instead, they cheered. "Nice," wrote Lenka, who once considered him her most reliable audience. "Didn't know you could draw like this," replied his coworker Mark, who usually only commented on fantasy football. Each new message chipped a little more guilt off Victor's shoulders. Imperfection was unexpectedly freeing. On Wednesday, Victor's boss called a surprise meeting. During a lull, Victor accidentally blurted out an idea he'd wanted to suggest for months. Silence. Then Lisa, the toughest critic in the room, nodded. "That's actually workable. Let's try it." Victor's heart beat too fast, but pride shot through him. One crack in his usual habit of staying silent. He left work feeling exhausted but oddly victorious. At home, he added "spoke up at work" to his list of experiments. Mira sent a selfie that night, paint splattered, hair wild, some bizarre outdoor drum circle in progress. She captioned it, "Failure Club Meetup, Entry, Doing Before Knowing." Victor smiled bigger than he had in months and took a photo of his messy kitchen-turned-art studio in reply. A single victory, but victory nonetheless. By Friday, the experiment had become almost fun. Victor jogged through rain, each puddle a small act of rebellion. He tried a new recipe, disaster. Played guitar for his neighbor's kid, badly, but she clapped anyway. And wrote a one-page letter to an old friend he hadn't called since last fall. He stopped waiting for confidence and found it, crumb by crumb, scattered along the way with every awkward first. He realized no applause would ever come for this. The days of grand unveilings and perfect reveals in his mind had kept him from the actual business of living, experimenting badly, risking embarrassment, pushing through inertia by inches. He updated his status, just for himself, with 3 words: "Begone, messed up, continued." Sunday circled back, But the apartment seemed less judgmental, the projects a little less daunting. The Museum of Unfinished Things had become a laboratory of tries, errors, and tiny satisfying wins. And when he listened, really listened, he could almost make out the faint accidental music of life moving forward. The one sound he'd been missing all along. Victor woke up before sunrise, startled not by worry but by restless energy. The apartment, long a museum to his avoidance, now felt like a half finished workshop. Funny sketches taped to the fridge, burnt toast crumbs on the stove, a row of messy, joyfully ugly paintings lined up along the window ledge. He brewed strong coffee and stared at the city outside, feeling the odd assurance that life might finally be shifting. The night before, Victor had found himself knee deep in a new experiment, a bet with Mira. Do something just slightly embarrassing every day for a week. Winner gets dinner at their favorite spot, loser has to wear a suit to the next family picnic. Mira's reply had come almost instantly, a photo of her reciting poetry in a bustling metro car, a crowd of strangers staring with mild confusion and delight. If she could be bold in public, surely he could dare a little more in private. Victor's first attempt, recording a video diary. He cringed at the sound of his voice, the hunched posture, the way anxiety flickered in his eyes, but he posted it anyway, captioned, "Trying something new, spoiler, scary." A single like from a high school friend made him laugh. The audience didn't matter, the act did. The next day, he joined an open mic at a local cafe, his voice so shaky the host encouraged him with a wink. He shared the story of failing to write his book, the guilt of waiting, the comedy in his obsessive list making. The audience laughed at all the right moments, and afterward, the barista approached him to say, "Made me feel better about my own abandoned blog." Victor's sense of isolation, so long his shadow, began to thin. He began documenting each day's micro dares in a private notebook, returning a wrong order just to advocate for himself, joining a parkour class despite a total lack of agility, messaging Mira unpopular opinions on new music releases. Some experiments stung. One day he tried to reconnect with an old classmate and got ghosted. Another day, his attempt at a viral tweet fizzled with zero engagement. But the catalogue of micro failures soon outweighed his comfort with stagnation. Disappointment stung, but regret faded fast. As Victor's actions multiplied, so did his sense of purpose. He noticed a pattern. Each new act rewrote the script of his days, making uncertainty a background noise instead of a blaring alarm. He had always imagined courage meant grand gestures, but it was the steady layering of little risks, awkward hellos, bad drawings, unfinished songs that made life start to ripple outward. Evenings once spent doom scrolling or planning imaginary victories were now filled with impulsive experiments. The habit of progress replaced the habit of worry, one clumsy try at a time. A turning point came one weekend at Mira's farewell party before her Peru trip. She roped Victor into leading a silly dance. Self-conscious at first, Victor eventually surrendered to the absurdity. Guests cheered. Some filmed the moment, others joined. When the music ended, Mira hugged him and whispered, "See, felt the fear, but now you have the memory." In that instant, Victor realized he'd spent years valuing pride more than experience, and that real pride came from trying anyway. As the room buzzed around him, Victor overheard guests trading their own someday dreams, songs unwritten, trips unplanned, apologies unspoken. The difference between stalled and started felt so simple, but it wasn't just about willpower. It was about habits, momentum, even a little companionship. He decided to keep sharing his failures and experiments online, short videos, awkward confessions, and all the messy first drafts. The comment section gradually filled. This made my day. Your honesty is braver than most people's perfection. I started tonight, even though it sucked. Monday morning, Victor woke with a feeling he'd missed for too long, anticipation. Some days were still tough, anxiety lurking at the edges. Old fears waited for him when he slowed down. But each new risk, however trivial, sending a risky work memo, asking a neighbor for coffee, showing up to a soccer game alone added a layer of confidence, slowly multiplying into the life he'd once only written about. Months later, Victor read back through his first lists and barely recognized the passive, hoping version of himself. Instead of longing for the right moment, he now designed his days around the thrill and humility of a living experiment, sometimes failing spectacularly, sometimes just quietly showing up. Regret no longer owned him, and as he stood at Mira's airport gate, waving her off, he understood. The game of waiting was over, replaced by the beautiful and unpredictable habit of beginning. Life finally was in play.